Welcome back to another episode. This is, again, we're going to be featuring several of Monte Cristo's videos. Well, part of it is because if we didn't, we actually don't have any other games to show, but also the games are quite nice. And also, thanks to the fact that he's basically the perfect level of play where he makes enough obscure mistakes, but not such obvious mistakes. So they're good to look at and learn from when, despite being mistakes that aren't easy to spot while you're in the moment and playing the game. So um it is going to be all right. They're going to be very informative, and so let's just take a quick look. This is going to be a game featuring Nightfall aggro versus Thresh Nasus, and the enemy deck can be relatively aggressive depending on how they curve. So you do have to be careful, but if they're not too aggressive, you can take your time and set up some more explosive turns, because the thing about Nightfall aggro is that, or just Nightfall cards in general, is that you're better off playing two cards every other turn rather than one card every turn, because that's how Nightfall works. If you play one card, you're not going to get your effect. So you do have to be careful, because so many cards are Nightfall. You need to make sure you have enough Nightfall triggers. And so in this situation, he plays the Duskbringer for the 2 face damage, which makes a lot of sense. Because that's a very natural play. But you should also understand that there's going to be a lot of situations where to get more Nightfall triggers, depending on what you have, it is valuable to hold the Duskbringer himself as a Nightfall trigger, so that you can use, for example, play Duskbringer plus Diana on round 3 or something like that, and save Dusk Petal for another turn. Or another round, and to trigger all of your Nightfall unit cards on that round. So it's not important to spend all of your mana. Just you can hold your spell mana in between rounds and then play all of them at once, because that's how Nightfall works. So yes, he does get the 2 damage, but it is also worth thinking about to depending on your hand and the situation, it is worth holding on to the Duskbringer for a turn where you want to use him to trigger the Nightfall, or just to play him when you need to block with him. So now, obviously, you take this 4 damage. It is 4 damage. And so, to be clear, I'm not necessarily saying that playing Duskbringer round 1 was wrong this game. I'm just saying, if you play decks like this, watch your hand and consider the possibility. Now, here in this turn, you'll notice that our opponent plays Caretaker, which is pretty disgusting, if to be honest. So here, he doesn't really have the best Nightfall turn. He can play Duskbringer, yes, but that would still limit him to playing a single Nightfall card, or technically Nightfall unit. So that would mean he has the option of playing, for example, Dusk Petal plus Pale Cascade plus Diana if he really wanted to. But then you're not really triggering Diana's level up plus Challenger next turn, so that isn't all that special. And you could use Pale Cascade to save the 5/2, so you definitely want to save the 5/2 from the 2/1s this turn. But if you go with that line, you get 2 Diana stacks. She becomes 3 out of 4, but you need to play 2 Nightfall cards next turn in order to level her up and give her Challenger, which is actually quite difficult because you don't have the method of actually triggering the Nightfall immediately for that. So what I propose is to just play Nocturne to reduce the attack of these Challengers by 1, probably give vulnerable to either the 2/1 or the 4/3, obviously. Either way, it's not a big deal. I think the 2/1 is a little bit better, so you can pull it with the Nocturne, and that way your Nocturne can attack safely. But the 4/3 also works where you challenge it with the 5/2. But the 2/1 is a little bit better, because that way the Nocturne doesn't have to worry about getting blocked by whatever else they play after. And also, you end up with two Nightfall units on the board. So if you can manage to play 2 Nightfall units next turn, then you can also level up Nocturne as a bonus. Or in some near future turn. Maybe not next. So here he goes for the Pale Cascade play. But I think the Nocturne play would have been better. Just reduce all of their attack by 1. Would also give you an extra blocker if you need it. Depending on what they play. I mean, it's unlikely that you have a great block with Nocturne. They'll probably just pull it with the other 1/1 ephemeral, and it ends up working out about the same. So in this turn, we top deck Mountain Goat, which is really nice because it effectively gives us 2 Nightfall triggers between him himself as well as the gem. Now in this position, this attack is very good because if he chooses to block with so first of all, he wants to generate the gem, and if they block the 5/1 with either the Thresh or the 2/1, both of them are good. If it's a 2/1, you can Unspeakable Horror and then get your 5 overall damage without letting your 5/1 die. Or if they block with the Thresh, you can Pale Cascade or Horror to also to kill the Thresh. Now in this position, by the way, Pale Cascade would be better so that you're not vulnerable to Vile Feast. Now, if they block the Mountain Goat with the Thresh, which would be much more favorable for them, that would be worse. But you still get the gem, so you're not all too worried about it. So this attack is very good. Now here, when they take the opponent realizes that if we have Unspeakable Horror, we could we could kill the 2/1 and still get the 5 damage and protect our 5/1. Now, and here, if we go for the Pale Cascade, then they can glimpse and counter us, which is what they did. So instead of this Pale Cascade, it would have been slightly better to just let it through and then play the Doom Beast. You get the gem right away. You get your Doom Beast out on the board, because you don't really have a great chance to play the Doom Beast anyway. So yes, you do save the Mountain Goat, which is valuable, but I think you should just play out the Doom Beast, and then you'll still have Pale Cascade for later. Now, instead, if they didn't have the glimpse, then the Pale Cascade would have been better. But also, if they had a Vile Feast and they were just saving it in case we had a Pale Cascade, that would have been kind of lame too. So sometimes, if you just settle for an attack and then say that I'm fine with this, then you don't take any risks, right? And that's kind of the idea. It's more about minimizing risk than anything else. Now, obviously, the ephemeral one is the best way of triggering the Nightfall because it's gonna die anyway, and the Nightfall trigger doesn't really do anything, especially since it's just gonna die. The +2 attack only matters in terms of blocking the Thresh, but Thresh has challengers, so using this this Crescent Guardian as your Nightfall trigger makes a lot of sense. And now I actually don't like this Pale Cascade. I would much prefer Unspeakable Horror, and the reason for that is actually because it's a Diana. You don't want to reshuffle your Diana. If they do something to trick this combat, you don't have a Diana anymore. Whereas you could have a 2-mana 5/3 challenger with quick attack to start farming their units and start taking down their shit for free. So I really don't like this Pale Cascade. I would much rather just use the Unspeakable Horror, let the Diana die just to make sure that we have a second backup Diana, rather than having a 1 health Diana, basically. Even though it does draw as the card, again, if you minimize the risks in a situation where it's all good, then obviously, as I've mentioned before, risk minimization only really works properly if you're in a position where you can afford to. If you're losing, then you have to take risks. But this isn't really a situation where you have to take such risks. Although Atrocity was not the best answer, definitely not one of the things where we were most worried about. It was an answer, obviously, but we're okay with it for the most part. It does level their Thresh though, which is unfortunate. And so in this position, you'll notice that when we attack, right now Nokken is 2 out of 4. We attacked with the Crescent Guardian on round 3, and we attacked with the Crescent Guardian on round 5. If we played differently, I'm pretty sure that we would be able to level the Nocturne. Especially if we... Actually, maybe we didn't even need to Unspeakable Horror last round, because that way we would have it this round. Yeah, actually, if we save the Diana in our hand, then we could just play it this turn instead. And that would just to trigger our Diana. That actually would have been better. Because we keep our spell mana, we give our Diana an extra +2 attack. Well, I'm assuming that the dying Diana doesn't level up the Thresh. I'm not sure if Thresh was 4 out of 6, then it would have been. I think it would have been better. But anyways, if we move forward here, now we have a situation where Nocturne isn't. If Nocturne was leveled, we would be able to Pale Cascade and try to kill the Thresh. Or if we had one more Nightfall unit to attack with. So again, it comes down to the fact that we are committing a lot of cards and mana on these in between turns, so that we don't have these explosive turns that this deck was made to do. And it really comes back to us to give us these situations where we're not making the most out of our cards, basically. And this attack is very good because here, if he pulls with the Mountain Goat, then the opponent gets to block the 2-1 with the 1-1. Instead, they have to trade the Butcher for essentially the same trades. Now, in this position, this game is already very bad. So it's going to come down to top decks, and also the Doom Beast. You're going to need the Atrocity to connect, basically. So right now, thanks to the fact that we top deck Luminary Shadestalker, which is really good, by the way, it gives us an extra 2 damage, so we can take this 2 damage, the Doom Beast 2 damage, and we're going to have Atrocity. So we do have the ability to push lethal, but it is important to get as much as we can because they run Rite of Negations in their deck. So there is definitely risk. We're not out of the woods yet. But thanks to his top deck, he top decks a second Luminary Shadestalker, and this is going to be a very safe lethal now. Our opponent goes for the Atrocity, but we managed. We luckily rolled a second Moonlight Affliction from our Unspeakable Horrors, but all of this wouldn't have been necessary if we killed the Thresh. And that's of course assuming that they didn't have a second. But if they did, some things would be. Then I mean, it would have been suboptimal anyway. They probably made some misplays somewhere else. I'm not sure what exactly their hand was, but the most important things is I would say the biggest problem is that we committed a lot of our resources on turns where we didn't need to, and allowed ourselves to not have the best turns when we needed them, which specifically happens to be during our attack token. And we ended up making a lot of awkward plays where if you just take some concessions, you can make up for it and more during the turns where you're triggering all your Nightfalls, because that's how the deck works. Anyways, the rest of the game plays itself. I'll go back and recap on the most important moments just for the sake of it. If we take a look here, I'd say whether or not the turn 1 Duskbringer is correct is vague. I think a lot of it comes down to preference. This is all fine. I think turn 4 definitely should be Nocturne. I think that just using Nocturne here is the best. Just reducing the attack of their challengers, their things that go face. It's just safer rather than going for this awkward play where we lose out on our challenger for Diana and everything. So actually, looking at this hand right now makes me wish we saved the Duskbringer on turn 1. But the thing is, what happens is that our turn 3 is awkward because we would basically commit to playing Diana, and they might not have something for us to pull. So it ends up being okay. But we would also have the Stalking Shadows, so it's not all bad. For example, we could still play Stalking Shadows plus Crescent Guardian on turn 3, and then still have the Duskbringer for another turn. That would have been valid as well. Or Crescent, Stalking Shadows plus Diana if they played something. But here, and then here on this turn, we would have had, we would still have Nocturne, and then on round 5, we could play our Duskbringer plus, Diana, etc. All that, I'm not really going to go that deep into it because it's all what ifs. It gets too deep. I don't know exactly what would have happened, so I'm not going to commit on that. But the fact that we never really have spell mana on these turns just makes the turns so much more awkward, because what happens is during the turns where you play a non-Nightfall card, like your Duskbringer, your Dusk Petal, you want to be playing as many Nightfall cards as possible, because you have a limited number of non-Nightfall cards, right? So as soon as you trigger Nightfall, it's triggered for the rest of the round, no matter how many cards you play. But as soon as the round ends, you're gonna have to find a new trigger for it, which is why it's so awkward. These situations are so awkward. Another thing is, so here we would set up the Diana next turn, and we would set up, and we would also level the Nocturne very, very soon. And then the following turns would have just been nice. It would have played itself. The game would have flowed naturally, and I'm pretty sure we would have just won. Of course, if they played a natural Nasus and it was still 14-14, then without rolling the Moonlight Affliction, it could still get spooky. But that's further down the line, and that's RNG that we can't really influence whether or not we make the same plays, right? That's just something we don't have control over, and not really something you say, oh, but look, we rolled Moonlight Affliction this week. That's just not how this works. Maybe they didn't even have a Nasus. Maybe they didn't have a second Thresh, right? Who knows? But what we do know is that we would have had a much more comfortable long-term curve where we have better and cleaner plays, and you don't have to make these difficult decisions. That's kind of what I want to communicate. You want to understand how your cards play, how your cards want to be played, and so try to follow the game plan based on that when thinking about your decks. Maybe think, could I improve my curve just by playing differently? Anyways, that varies by deck. It's not unique to Nightfall. Nightfall just happens to be a very obvious example for it, but you do see examples like this in other decks, and this is applicable elsewhere. Thank you for watching. Have a great day. If you've made it all the way here, you are an excellent viewer, and I'll see you guys next time.